Hi, I'm Nate, and you're watching Photolearningism. So you may have seen that Ubuntu 22.04, the Jammy Jellyfish, has been released, and if you tried it out, you may have noticed there's some funny things going on, some new things, some exciting things, and I wanted to walk through them and show you the good, the bad, and the ugly. Let's get to it. All right, so this is the new layout, typical default you'll get when you upgrade, and it does take about 2 to 3 hours. At least in my case it did, and it cautions you as you start the process. Hey, it'll take a couple hours. It walks through a couple different phases of putting the new packages in and removing the old deprecated packages, and it does a really good job of stepping through that. There really weren't any issues there. I did notice some anomalies though as we stepped into using it for the first time, as well as some good things. So I wanted to start with an anomaly. With Libreoffice, it does push a big upgrade out there. And you may be familiar, if you've used LibreOffice a bit in the past, with the spell check challenges that have come up. There used to be a fix out there where if you went to Tools and you went to Language, you might have to do the for all text and select your language. Now I'm using English, so that's what I do. However, that wasn't working here. And spell check coming out of the box here wasn't doing things. You'll see how this is underlined here, and you would normally have an opportunity to spell check that. Wasn't doing that. It wasn't recognizing that, and if you went to spell check, it was all blank. If we were to call up that dialog, none of these things were here. It would just be empty, even though the English language was still selected, or I could select it and it wouldn't do anything. So there are some of the options out there where you can go into Tools and Options, and there's a whole language section here under Language Settings, Languages, and you can check the default languages for documents, which again in my case was correct, and they also caution you, hey, make sure there's a little green check mark next to it. All that was there, but it still wasn't working, so I found what I had to do, you may have to do this as well, is I actually had to refresh the languages. And the way you do that is you have to fire up good old terminal, and there's a command which is the sudo apt search my spell, and that will call up all the different language packs that you can add in, including the one you have. So what I did is I put a couple other editions of English in there, and including the default one. I reloaded that one. So the command for it is you start off with the traditional sudo apt install, and then you put the name of the language pack on the end of it, which it does tell you if you run through the different options there. So I had to rerun that, had to re-put the default in, and once I did that, what I tried doing was I went back into Tools and then Options, back into the language settings and languages. I flipped the default language to one of the other options, and then back again, applied it, and that finally started to work. So you may have to kind of like tweak it back in. I think there's a small bug there where it doesn't quite recognize, at least for me, it didn't recognize the default language. So you may have to play around with that, and then following that, you will get that option to finally get spell check working again. All right, so that was interesting thing number one. All right, next thing that I noticed was coming back to the drawing tablet. I did a video recently on the HUION 610 Pro, the V2, and it worked at least in recognizing the device within Ubuntu, but it didn't work with screen mapping, meaning if you have two screens, it wouldn't let you map to one or the other. It would work only on the primary screen of the computer. That seems to be fixed now, which is really, really good news. And if you use the HUION tablet package, they actually do put one out there, and I can put a link in the description below to where you get this. You'd want to use one of the Canvas Pro ones respective to your model, but in the 610 case, I was able to use the this version here, if that's helpful. So once loaded, you do have to reboot, and then it brings up a utility where you can finally map the screens. Now I realize this looks a little wonky, but it actually works where I was able to map my secondary screen. They're both on. My workaround before was I had to turn one of the screens off, but now as I use the pen, I'm just going to put this on. If you can see the cursor, I don't know if you can. There we go. I'm able to use it on the secondary screen. I think it's hiding some things because it's shared for OBS, but it now maps to that screen, and I don't have to do any special settings and workarounds while I'm trying to use the digital tablet. So that was a really good enhancement to see that they've improved the support for tablets, and in fact the buttons on it now work as well. They didn't before. So if we were to go into the press keys here, many of these now work. Now the buttons and the functions they fulfill, you may have to tweak a little bit. Undo doesn't seem to work, interestingly enough. Not sure what that's about, but the other ones here do seem to play, and this is really useful for increasing and decreasing your zoom. Also, for adjusting the space is good if you want to move the canvas around. So there's some interesting things in terms of Krita, which I found very useful coming into this, and it's nice to see these are now supported. So that's a good piece to have within Jammy Jellyfish. All right. So some other things here. Nautilus, which is the default file explorer. Something interesting there, where you may have noticed up top here, it kind of borrows this concept of click to navigate, kind of like Windows has done. That now works in Nautilus here in this file explorer. It does have a bug here, though, I've noticed, where they've tried to borrow this idea of like a quick launch idea, but if you click on one, it kills it. So I'm not quite sure what's up with that. It doesn't seem to harm anything. It doesn't throw any errors, but it doesn't work either. So you can use a new window. That does seem to work just fine. But those other quick areas just don't seem to work properly, and that might be something that needs to be fixed, just to be aware of. So some good, some odd things there. All right, last one is actually in OBS, which I'm recording on right now. I noticed that with the second screen, I used to notice this in Windows too. So it actually broke that second screen as my workspace. I had to re-add that, and I think something got tweaked with the sharing mechanism, because now when I screen share, there's this other thing up here that comes into play, and I didn't have to do that previously. So there might be some added security. There might be just some added ways that OBS interacts with the desktop share, but it's different. I wanted you to know that it was different if you're using it, and you may have to play with that a little bit to get it back, and you have to add it as another source. Also, the camera I'm working off the Elgato 4K capture card. That gave me a little trouble where I had to kind of re-add the device, and I had to turn it on, turn it off, close OBS once or twice, and it finally started to come back and work. There are a couple of bugs and quirks I'm noticing. Also, the OBS interface itself, sometimes I'll click on things and it doesn't quite come into play. So I think there's still one or two things in this new version of Ubuntu that are coming into light, coming into play, that need to be adjusted a little bit. There might need to be an update for OBS now that this has come around. But for the most part, everything is working fairly well, fairly seamlessly. There's just these couple of things, if you're a content creator like me, that you might notice that are like, that's not the way it was before. So I hope that's helpful. Hope that's useful. Wine, I've noticed, is also a little bit more compatible with things. If you're into running cross-window things, that's the translator, the emulator that usually comes packaged with Ubuntu, where you can run some things. Notepad++ worked right out of the box. There's some other things here which I'm playing with. They're so close to kind of coming. They didn't work at all before, and they're close, and I'm working on those. I'll share that with you if I happen to get around to it. But there's some huge benefits now to stepping into this, along with the quirks, and I think it's definitely worthwhile. If you're worried about trying it, you can do that. The upgrade itself is safe. There's just a couple of quirks once you get there that you may have to tweak, and you can enjoy the bigger, better experience of moving on and moving up. So I hope that is helpful, and I hope that removes any anxiety or intimidation about doing the upgrade. Nothing broke along the way, and I use a lot of things in my setup that could have given me trouble coming into this. So hopefully that gives you some confidence about upgrading Ubuntu if you're in that Linux arena, and gives you some pitfalls that hopefully you won't fall into now. This is Photolearningism. Please do give me a thumbs up if that's useful. Also, subscribe if you haven't done that already, and I will see you at the next video.